In the race for Florida's Senate seat, Democratic challenger Debbie Mucarsel-Powell is challenging incumbent Republican Rick Scott. I'm joined now on the phone by Mucarsel-Powell. Welcome.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. And so this race has been very close at some points, according to polls, and less so at others. Um, about half of all Floridians have voted now. So in this next 24 hours, what's your expectation of what's going to happen in this race?
So I wish I could answer that question. I don't think anybody truly knows at this point. We're seeing a different voting pattern that we have seen, and it's not just here in Florida, it's all across the country. I'm really happy to see that there's so much enthusiasm I've been all over the state. We have seen people coming out in very large numbers, and people waiting in line. And at this point, what we're doing is focusing on just talking to the voters that haven't come out yet, right? To the voters that may not have made a decision, to remind them that I'm someone that came here when I was very young, started working at a minimum wage job, and I was able to get a really good job at FIU here in South Florida. I was the associate dean at the medical school, and then was elected to serve in Congress. I did a lot to bring funding for Everglades restoration. I've done a lot to reduce gun violence, lower the cost of living. I expanded Medicare coverage when I was in Congress, and it's for all those reasons that I want to represent them in the Senate at the federal level. I want to work for all Floridians, regardless of political affiliation. And that's what I'm seeing, that I am getting support from not only Democrats, but Republicans, independents, people that are coming to realize that we need better representation. Rick Scott has been in office for 14 years, and he's done really nothing to help us. I mean, he actually has been voting against all bipartisan legislation at the federal level. We don't need extremism in Washington, D.C. We don't need someone that's, my way or the highway. That's not how things work in government. You have to be able to reach across the aisle. You have to be able to compromise. You need to figure out ways to help the people that are most vulnerable here, our coastal communities, our fisheries, manufacturing. We need to bring jobs down to the state of Florida. And that's what I want to focus on. I am tired, like everybody else, of the partisanship, of the political divide. I want us to be united in a vision of a better Florida.
Mm-hmm. We are talking to Senate candidate Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. She will also answer your calls and questions. If you have them, you can reach us at 904-549-2937, or you can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to ask you, why did you personally get involved in politics? I mean, your own story is an interesting one. You immigrated from Ecuador as a 14-year-old. You lost your
Yeah,
father to gun violence,
yeah.
and I'm sorry about that, but those must have been kind of two very formative issues that also happen to overlap a lot with political discussions.
I think, I never really thought that I would run for political office. And when you come here from a different country, you don't even think that that's possible when you first get here. I had been working at the university here at FIU trying to expand access to healthcare. And I was watching how not only at the federal level, but also statewide, they were making significant cuts. And at that time, actually, Rick Scott was governor. He refused to expand Medicaid, if you remember, and he also made, from one day to the next, he eliminated the state matching program for universities here in our state. So that affected students, that affected a lot of the research programs that we had. But I was always very engaged. And like you said, I've gone through a lot in my life. And losing my father, I really think that was a point for me when I wanted to dedicate myself and making sure that we protect our communities from violence, create safer communities, work to make it easier for people when you've gone through so much pain. You don't want others, if you can help communities avoid that pain, right? Families avoid that pain, you do what you can. And at that point, I had been very civically engaged. And it was a group of people that knew the work that I had been doing that asked me to consider running. And I was married, I had kids, I was working at FIU. I thought it was a crazy proposition. But usually people like myself that don't think about politics are sometimes the better public servants, because for us, it's not about power. It's not about titles. It really is about doing the work. And the community at that point saw that, and they worked very hard to elect me. And now I am where I am because of Floridians, right? I mean, I owe it to every single person that I've met on the campaign trail, all the conversations that we've had, that they want someone that's just going to go and do the work for them, someone that they can have conversations with. I've done a lot of listening tours, also roundtables with a lot of constituencies, students, older seniors who are really worried about their Medicare and Social Security. I've had roundtables with women that are so concerned about the 6-week ban that Rick Scott supports, and he actually co-sponsored a national abortion ban. I've had conversations with business owners that are worried about these attacks against immigrants. They want immigration reform. They want to be able to employ people that want to come here and work in our tourism sector, in our agricultural sector. So, I am really proud of what we've been able to build. I feel optimistic because I believe in what's possible here when we all work together. And that's what happened in 2018.
So, what is your? I mean, if elected, what do you see as being any opportunity to address guns or gun violence, given the current, intransigence between the two parties and the lack of cooperative action?
There's a bill that everybody supports. I mean, I would say close to 90% of Americans support it. It's the Universal Background Check bill. We've been talking about this bill for a while now. When I was in Congress, we passed it in the House. It did not pass the Senate. Mitch McConnell was Senate Majority Leader, and so he blocked that bill from even going onto the floor for a vote. So people need to really lift their voices up, use that power that they have at the ballot box to elect representatives that are going to have the courage to stand up to the gun lobby. This is a bill that is completely sensical, that would protect communities from gun violence and our children from gun violence. It closes the gun show loopholes. If you have a violent background, you should not have easy access to weapons. And, we have seen for years now that the NRA and other gun lobby organizations have tried to misinform the public, saying that somehow this affects the Second Amendment right. I worked with Giffords. We support responsible gun ownership. It's not about not supporting the Second Amendment. It's about doing what we need to do as leaders to protect our children from being killed every day to community violence. We just saw another shooting in Orlando on Halloween night. This happens. This is a unique issue for the United States of America because of the hold that the gun lobby has on people like Rick Scott, on extreme politicians that would rather have power than really do the right thing for our families. And so that's a bill that I think if we can win the Senate majority, because I know that most of the senators up in D.C. support the universal background check bill, there's a way to get bipartisan support. We have to pass it. That's why elections are so important. And that's why everyone listening, if you have not voted, your vote can determine whether I go to D.C. and fight for you or Rick Scott goes back. He wants to be Senate Majority Leader. Just imagine a world where you would miss Mitch McConnell as Senate Majority Leader. And Mitch McConnell, by the way, has distanced himself from Rick Scott because he's so extreme and radical.
So, in terms of the leadership, I mean, Scott, unsuccessfully challenged Mitch McConnell for his party leadership post previously, and he wants now to be Senate Minority Leader or Senate Majority Leader, depending on how this election turns out. Now, he's not currently one of the two front runners. That falls to South Dakota's John Thune and John Cornyn of Texas, but he's close with President Trump, and a Trump endorsement could potentially win some more votes for Rick Scott and, give him leverage to influence that race. I would imagine, and we reached out to Rick Scott, we should say. We asked him to come on the program, and we have not heard back. But I would imagine that he would argue that, having a leadership position, with a senator from Florida would make a big difference for Floridians.
And I'm going to laugh, and sorry about that, but he has a plan. He wrote a plan. He published a plan. It's a plan that Republicans have completely avoided even talking about because it's so extreme. And what's in this plan is eliminating Medicare and Social Security. He wants to raise taxes on middle-class families while continuing to cut taxes for the top 0.1% of the people living in the country. He has supported Project 2025. He's aligned with Heritage Foundation, which wants to dismantle the Department of Education. This is a man who paid advertisements all across the state saying that teachers are socialists. This is a man who voted against access to IVF, yet has ads on TV saying he wants to support access to IVF. Nobody, nobody can trust Rick Scott. And it's been a pattern of behavior. Committed Medicare fraud before he was governor, and they had to pay back to the government $1.7 billion. That's why he's evading responsibility and accountability. He refuses to have a debate with me. And of course, now tomorrow's election day, and it's a complete disservice and disrespectful to the voters of the state of Florida who should hear from the senator. Why does he want another 6 years? He's been 14 years in government. What has he done? What is his plan? But he doesn't want to answer questions. And I've had so many interviews, and you're saying you reached out. Every interview I do, all the different outlets have said, we have reached out to Rick Scott's campaign. We don't hear back. That is dereliction of duty. He's a public servant. But he doesn't understand what it means to serve the public. He just wants to use that for self-gain and power.
And I just want to clarify, I mean, you said that he proposed, ending Medicare and Social Security. And in fact, he had proposed sunsetting all federal laws after 5 years,
Right.
which would require a reauthorization of those programs along with every other federal program. He ultimately removed those two programs from the proposed legislation after there was a lot of pushback about that. Um,
Yeah, for a year. It took him a year to do that because yes, I mean, like I said, Republicans were just like outraged that he did that. But you just can't trust him, right? I mean, that's the whole point. Someone that keeps doing the wrong things and then tries to walk back something that we all know he wants to do, you can't trust him taking only those two out. What about the Affordable Care Act? He has been very vocal about eliminating the Affordable Care Act. Over 4 million Floridians get their health care through the ACA. He refused to expand Medicaid. He took money from the government. He stole money from our seniors when he committed Medicare fraud. I mean, he should not be anywhere near public office.
yeah, and to be clear, he was not convicted of Medicare fraud. His company paid a large fine, I think a historic nearly $2 billion fraud fine, but that was his former company, HCA. I want to ask you about environmental issues because obviously Florida has been walloped a few times in the past season and seasons prior, from um, very intense storms. How, what would you propose doing to make Florida more resilient as senator?
Yeah. So one of the things that I did in Congress, which was very important for water quality issues and to really help the water flow south, is bring $200 million in Everglades restoration. And I did that working with Republicans. I worked with Francis Rooney at the time, Brian Mast. Even if you don't agree on all the issues, you need to find people that you can find consensus with, that you can build consensus to pass these bills. And we did that. We brought $200 million. I was very proud of that bill. We need to pass a bill that would be very similar to the Inflation Reduction Act. What that bill did is it provides tax incentives for companies that are going towards green energy programs. We should be leading in manufacturing solar panels. We only do that. We only have like 2% of our energy here in the state of Florida comes from solar. I spoke with a small business owner who in Tampa, in that area, affected by two severe storms. He had transferred into solar energy, and he was up and running within 24 hours that the storm hit, while a lot of people were waiting still to get their power up after 2-3 weeks of the storm's passing. We need to fully fund FEMA. We need to make sure that FEMA is ready with the funding that it needs to provide disaster relief. Rick Scott voted against FEMA funding, and I want to make that very clear. He denied that climate change even exists when he was governor. He banned the term climate change from being used in state agencies. He took away $700 million from water management programs. He repealed environmental protections, which caused the largest fish kill that we saw on the west coast of Florida in 2018. We need to invest in resilient infrastructure. We need to work with local government to change the building codes that adjust to those resilient requirements. So if you're building anything in areas that are prone to flooding or storms, they have to be built to code. And I've seen the difference between those structures and those that are older structures that were not built to code. And we need to have a serious conversation in certain areas that are such low-lying areas, whether people need to continue to build in those areas. I mean, we have been really ground zero for the effects of these catastrophic storms, which of course are due to climate change issues. We are dealing with a climate crisis, and we don't have a whole lot of time to try and reduce carbon emissions, to try to get towards a green energy economy. And again, I say economy because there are a lot of opportunities for really good paying jobs when you start transitioning to more green energy. We need to work on the grid. I mean,
And I
we
wanna
still have
I wanna
across our
get to a call
yeah.
if we can here. We're talking to
Yeah,
Senate
sorry.
That's okay. We
You
wanna
asked me
talk to
about
s
environment. I have like a list of things. Yeah, yeah.
we're talking to Senate candidate Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. We have a call from Michael on the north side. Michael, go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I just wanted to agree with her. She's 100% right that we cannot trust Rick Scott to do the right thing. Years ago, when he was governor, the state was severely impacted by a hurricane during early voting. So we lost days on end of days that we could go to the polls and vote because, again, a hurricane hit, things were closed down. He had to be forced by the federal government to extend early voting just to give people the right to go and vote because they obviously lost that opportunity due to the storm. So that's something that you would think anybody with common sense or common decency would understand. Okay, things are shut down. We just got hit by a hurricane. We need to extend it so we can make up the days so people can vote. He understood that typically early voting is done by Democrats, which he is not. So it's in his favor. So he made a political choice, which was at the detriment of those people just wanting to exercise their constitutional right. So I support her 100%, and I think she's right.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Um,
Thank you, Michael.
yeah, just to wrap up, I mean, I think, what is it in this last, little window of opportunity for people who have not cast a ballot that you think should be the most salient issue in this senatorial race?
I think it's the affordability crisis that we have in the state of Florida. People think that they're being affected in their economy and in their cost of living here because of the federal government, and it's actually because of failed policies that we've been experiencing here, including the property insurance crisis. And one of the issues, the reasons why we have a property insurance crisis is because when Rick Scott was governor, and I really, I'm not saying this because I want to keep attacking Rick Scott. I'm saying this because it's true. It's factual. We have an insurance crisis, a property insurance crisis, because when Rick Scott was governor, he took $50 million of the public option and gave it to private insurance companies that came into the market unregulated and now refuse to pay claims like Heritage. There's a bill in the Senate that I could lead that would lower property insurance by 25%. We need to address the housing crisis. We need to continue to bring funding to build more affordable housing. We need to provide tax incentives for families that want to purchase their home and they just can't right now. I think that we need to lower for first-time home buyers that interest rate that is really crippling a lot of families, that they're just not able to do that. So I think the affordability crisis is one of the top issues, if not the top issue,
Well, Debbie,
and also protecting a woman's right to choose. Yeah.
sure. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.